So we are back again with our Wheat in Computers Production Possibilities Frontier. This time, right, the question we want to answer is what is the relationship between the Production Possibilities Frontier and the PPF, right? So if you recall, the opportunity cost of something is what you have to give up to obtain something, right? So in this case, the opportunity cost of computers is the amount of wheat you have to give up, right? So to see this, pick 2 points. Let's go D and C. So at point D, we are producing 3,000 wheat, 200 computers. And at point C, 2,000 computers and 300 wheat. And so let's say we want to move from D to C. Well, that means we're moving from producing 200 computers to 300 computers. So plus 100 computers. But on the wheat axis, we went from 3,000 to 2,000. So minus 1,000 wheat. And so the opportunity cost of 100 computers is the 1,000 wheat we had to give up. So more generally, the opportunity cost is going to be measured by the slope of the production possibilities frontier. And so if you want to know the opportunity cost of two goods and you have the production possibilities frontier, you can pick 2 points and calculate the slope, right? So recall from your math classes, slope is the rise over the run between 2 points. So let's use our D, point D and point C. We're moving from point D to C. Our rise was the change in the y-axis, which in this case is wheat, and we decreased by 1,000. So the change in the rise was minus 1,000. In our run, we increased by 100. So we can divide this, simplify. So minus 10, right? Minus 10 is the opportunity cost of computers. To be precise, we should put a unit, right? Minus 10 what? Wheat. Minus 10 wheat. 10 tons of wheat. So knowing that, we can start to compare opportunity costs between economies. So let's say this is France, this is England, and the products we're producing now are wine and cloth. And so in France, our PPF, we can do better than that. All right, so that's our PPF for France. And in England, it looks like this. And let's put some numbers. So in France, they have capacity to produce 600, say, bottles of wine or 300 yards of cloth. And in England, they can do 200 bottles of wine or 300 yards of cloth. So the question is which country has the lower opportunity cost of cloth? And so to answer that, we just need to calculate the slope for each of these PPFs. So for France, right, our slope is rise over run. And I've only given you 2 points, but it doesn't matter, right? We know this point is 0, 0. So we've got point A, which is 600 wine, 0 cloth, and point B, which is 300 cloth, 0 wine. And so just calculate the slope using these points, right? So if we move from A to B, we gave up this amount of wine and gained this amount of cloth. So plus 300 minus 600. So our slope is minus 600 over 300, which is minus 2. Right, so that's the opportunity cost of cloth for France. For England, we can do the same thing. This is point A, point B, and we move between them, right, A to B. We give up 200 bottles of wine to gain 300 yards of cloth. So in England's case, the slope is going to be minus 200 over 300, or minus 2/3. So which country has the lowest opportunity cost of cloth? We have both slopes calculated, and it's clear that England has the lower opportunity cost. It only costs 2/3 of a bottle of wine to gain a yard of cloth, whereas France, we have to give up 2 bottles of wine to gain a yard of cloth. So I've got 2 more points on the production possibilities frontier before we can wrap it up for good. So the first thing we want to address is the PPF static. So if this is our production possibilities frontier, we'll go back to good old Wheaton computers. Right, if this is your country and this is what your PPF looks like, are you stuck here? Can it ever change? Well, the answer is it does change, and it changes with economic growth, right? So things that can shift the PPF out are see, things that shift PPF, maybe education as your workforce gets more educated, technology, right? As we get more knowledgeable, maybe the amount of computers we can produce increases, and maybe our PPF shifts like this. If we increase in computers, but also increase in wheat simultaneously, we'll shift our whole PPF out parallel like this. Um, but you get the point, right? As the country gets more efficient at producing either of these things, the PPF increases outwards. Also, it doesn't have to be necessarily more efficient production. You could just get an increase in labor hours, so population change. Right? All these things will presumably shift your PPF outwards from the origin. And then the last point is on the shape of the PPF. Right? Up until this point, every production possibilities frontier we've drawn is linear. Which means our opportunity cost is constant at any point, right? If you calculate the slope between this point and this point, it's going to be the same as if you calculate the slope between this point and this point. But um, that might not always be the case. You can have a situation where the opportunity cost rises as the economy produces more of that good. So let's consider a new economy here. This economy produces beer and mountain bikes. And so, um, start with this point here, right? We've got the whole workforce producing beer and nobody producing mountain bikes. And so the implication of this is that everyone's producing beer, even if they're not good at producing beer. So even if you're really, really good at making mountain bikes, you're still producing beer. And so let's say we don't want all beer, we do want a few mountain bikes. So let's say we want to move to this point, right? We're going to come down a little bit on beer and out a little bit on mountain bikes. So let's call this point B. So think about who the people are that are going to shift from beer to mountain bikes, right? If you're allocating labor, you want the people who are really bad at producing beer to start producing mountain bikes. And so those people that are going to shift from beer to mountain bike production were not very good at producing beer in the first place. So you don't actually lose that much beer relative to the number of mountain bikes you gain. So the opportunity cost of that first few units of mountain bikes is actually quite low. Let me redraw this to make that evident, right? So the people we're sending from beer to mountain bikes, remember, they're really good at making mountain bikes. So let's say you only have to give up this much beer production because they suck at producing beer in the first place, but they're really good at making mountain bikes. So you get this many mountain bikes, right? So from point A to B, the slope is fairly shallow. But then let's say you're all the way, let's say here, right? You're producing a lot of mountain bikes, not a whole lot of beer. Well, the only people left producing beer are the ones who are good at it. And most of the people who are good at producing mountain bikes have already started producing mountain bikes, right? So to go from C to D, we have to give up the rest of the really good beer producers who are not good at making mountain bikes, which means we don't actually get that much more mountain bike production. So the point is, the slope is changing, i.e., the opportunity cost is changing based on where you are. So the opportunity cost is much steeper, or the slope is much steeper, meaning the opportunity cost is higher down here compared to up at A and B. And so what you end up getting a lot of times is this bow-shaped production possibilities frontier. which simply means as you head out to the extremes of either beer or all mountain bikes, your opportunity cost gets higher as you approach those extremes. So that is it for the production possibilities frontier. And that is the end of this module.